How Steam and digital downloads nearly killed GameStop. Picture this. It's 2003, and GameStop is riding high as the undisputed king of video game retail. With over 6,000 stores worldwide and annual revenues approaching $6 billion, they've built an empire on a simple formula. Buy games from publishers, sell them to customers, then buy those same games back as used copies for a fraction of the price and resell them for massive profits. Their used game margins often exceeded 50%, turning every $60 game into a potential gold mine. But in a cluttered office in Bellevue, Washington, a small team at Valve Corporation is about to unleash something that will threaten GameStop's very existence. They're putting the finishing touches on a digital distribution platform called Steam, and they have no idea they're about to trigger one of the most dramatic industry transformations in gaming history. This isn't just the story of how digital downloads revolutionized gaming. It's the tale of how an entire retail empire nearly crumbled in the face of ones and zeros. GameStop's rise to dominance began in the late 1990s when Barnes & Noble spun off their Babbages and Software etc. chains, eventually merging them with Funcoland to create the GameStop we know today. By 2005, they had become a retail juggernaut, acquiring their biggest competitor Electronics Boutique for $1.44 billion and cementing their position as the go-to destination for gamers. Their business model was beautifully simple, yet incredibly lucrative. While new games provided steady revenue, used games were pure profit gold. A customer would buy a $60 game, trade it back for $20, $30 in store credit, and GameStop would slap a $54.99 sticker on it and watch the margins soar. This used game ecosystem became so central to their success that by 2010, used games accounted for nearly half of their gross profit, despite representing only 27% of total revenue. But GameStop's empire was built on a fundamental assumption that would soon prove catastrophically wrong, that video games would always need to exist as physical objects that could be bought, sold, and traded. Steam launched on September 12, 2003, initially as nothing more than an update delivery system for Valve's own games like Counter-Strike and Half-Life. The early reception was brutal. Gamers hated the forced digital rights management, the constant internet connection requirements, and the buggy interface that seemed to break more often than it worked. Steam had fewer than 1 million users in its first year, and many industry observers dismissed it as Valve's misguided attempt to solve a problem that didn't exist. But Valve founder Gabe Newell had a vision that extended far beyond simple game updates. He saw a future where games could be distributed instantly, where massive multiplayer experiences could be seamlessly managed, and where the entire concept of physical retail could become obsolete. The first major hint of Steam's potential came in 2004 with the launch of Half-Life 2, which required Steam activation even for retail copies. Despite massive customer backlash and organized boycott attempts, the game sold over 12 million copies, proving that gamers would grudgingly accept digital distribution if the content was compelling enough. The real turning point came in 2005 when Valve made a decision that would reshape the entire gaming industry. They opened Steam to third-party publishers. Suddenly, companies like ID Software, Eidos, and Capcom began offering their games directly through Steam's platform. The value proposition was irresistible for publishers. Instead of giving retailers like GameStop a 20 to 25% cut of each sale, they could keep 70% of every dollar earned through Steam, with Valve taking only 30%. Even better, digital distribution eliminated the costs of manufacturing, shipping, and handling returns, while providing instant global reach to millions of potential customers. By 2007, Steam hosted over 200 games from dozens of publishers, and its user base had exploded to over 13 million accounts. GameStop, meanwhile, was still celebrating record profits from their used game sales, seemingly oblivious to the digital storm brewing on the horizon. As Steam's library expanded, so did its influence on gaming culture and consumer behavior. The platform introduced revolutionary features that physical retail simply couldn't match. Automatic game updates, cloud save synchronization, integrated voice chat, and most importantly, massive seasonal sales that offered games at discounts of 50%, 75%, or even 90% off regular prices. These Steam sales became cultural phenomena, generating memes, wish lists, and a new breed of patient gamers who would wait for inevitable price drops rather than paying full retail. By 2009, Steam was selling over $1 billion worth of games annually, and the platform had fundamentally changed how people discovered and purchased games. The Steam recommendation engine, user reviews, and social features created an ecosystem where games could find audiences organically, without needing the shelf space and marketing push that GameStop's physical stores provided. Publishers began to realize that digital distribution wasn't just cheaper, it was actually more effective at reaching the right customers. GameStop's first major crisis came during the 2008-2009 financial recession, but not for the reasons you might expect. While many retailers struggled with decreased consumer spending, GameStop's used game business actually thrived as budget-conscious gamers sought cheaper alternatives to $60 new releases. However, the recession accelerated two trends that would prove devastating to their long-term prospects. First, console manufacturers began building larger hard drives and better internet connectivity into their systems, making digital downloads more practical for average consumers. Second, a generation of gamers who had grown up with iTunes, Netflix, and other digital services began to view Steam not as an inconvenient DRM system, but as a natural evolution of how media should be consumed. By 2010, Steam had over 30 million active users and was adding roughly 5 million new accounts every year, while GameStop's same-store sales growth was beginning to slow for the first time in their history. The mobile gaming revolution of the early 2010s delivered another devastating blow to GameStop's traditional business model. Apple's App Store, launched in 2008, created an entirely new category of gaming that existed completely outside GameStop's retail ecosystem. Suddenly, games that cost 99 cents or were completely free to play were capturing millions of users and generating billions in revenue through microtransactions and advertising. Companies like King Digital Entertainment made over $1.8 billion annually from games like Candy Crush Saga, while GameStop struggled to maintain relevance in a market that was rapidly fragmenting. The rise of smartphones and tablets also meant that millions of casual gamers never needed to step foot in a GameStop store. They could discover, download, and play games instantly from devices they already owned. By 2012, mobile games were generating more revenue than handheld console games, traditionally one of GameStop's most profitable categories. Steam's influence reached a tipping point around 2013 when the platform surpassed 75 million active users and was processing over 3 billion hours of gameplay monthly. Valve had created something unprecedented in gaming history, a platform that was simultaneously a store, a social network, a gaming library, and a community hub. The introduction of Steam Workshop allowed players to create and share user-generated content, while Steam Greenlight gave indie developers a path to publish games without traditional publisher support. These features created network effects that made Steam increasingly valuable to both players and developers as it grew larger. Meanwhile, GameStop was struggling to adapt to the digital revolution, launching their own digital distribution platform called Impulse in 2011, but it failed to gain significant traction against Steam's established ecosystem. Their attempts to stay relevant in the digital space, including partnerships with companies like Kongregate for browser games, generated minimal revenue compared to their traditional retail operations. The period from 2014 to 2017 marked the beginning of GameStop's existential crisis. Digital game sales had grown to represent over 70% of PC game revenue, and console digital sales were rapidly approaching 50% of the market. Steam's annual revenue had surpassed $4.3 billion, making it larger than many traditional publishers, while GameStop's profits were increasingly dependent on a shrinking pool of customers who still preferred physical games. The company's stock price, which had peaked at over $60 per share in 2007, fell to around $30 and continued declining as investors lost confidence in the physical retail model. GameStop's leadership made increasingly desperate attempts to diversify, expanding into mobile phone sales, collectibles, and even attempting to rebrand some stores as GameStop gaming centers with gaming lounges and tournament spaces. None of these initiatives generated significant profits, and many industry analysts began predicting GameStop's imminent bankruptcy. By 2018, Steam had become the dominant force in PC gaming with over 125 million active users and more than 30,000 games in its catalog. Valve's annual revenue exceeded $6 billion, surpassing GameStop's peak performance while employing fewer than 400 people compared to GameStop's workforce of over 40,000. The efficiency gap was staggering. Steam could distribute unlimited copies of any game instantly to customers worldwide, while GameStop needed physical inventory, retail space, and armies of employees to achieve far smaller sales volumes. Console manufacturers had also begun embracing digital distribution, with Sony's PlayStation Store and Microsoft's Xbox Live Marketplace becoming major revenue generators that bypassed traditional retail entirely. Nintendo, long a holdout for physical-only releases, launched the Nintendo eShop and began offering day-and-date digital releases for major titles. GameStop's role as an essential intermediary between publishers and consumers had largely evaporated, leaving them with a business model designed for an era that no longer existed. The final chapter of GameStop's near-death experience came in 2019 and 2020, as a perfect storm of factors pushed the company to the brink of collapse. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated digital adoption as lockdowns prevented customers from visiting physical stores, while government restrictions forced GameStop to close thousands of locations for months at a time. During this period, Steam set multiple records for concurrent users, peaking at over 25 million simultaneous players as people turned to gaming for entertainment during isolation. GameStop's stock fell to under $4 per share in early 2020. And the company seemed destined for the same fate as other retail casualties like Blockbuster and Borders Books. They closed over 1,000 stores between 2019 and 2021, laid off thousands of employees, and burned through hundreds of millions in cash as their core business continued its relentless decline. Industry observers began writing GameStop's obituary, assuming that Steam and digital distribution had finally delivered the killing blow to the last major video game retailer. But this story doesn't end with GameStop's funeral. Instead, it takes one of the most unexpected turns in modern business history. In early 2021, a combination of short-squeeze dynamics, Reddit-fueled social media campaigns, and a new generation of retail investors transformed GameStop from a dying retailer into the ultimate meme stock phenomenon. The company's stock price rocketed from $17 to over $480 in a matter of weeks, generating billions in market capitalization and creating one of the most dramatic wealth transfers in stock market history. Suddenly, GameStop had the financial resources and cultural relevance to attempt a complete business transformation, pivoting toward NFTs, blockchain gaming, and digital collectibles. Whether this reinvention will succeed remains an open question, but GameStop's survival, against all odds and economic logic, proves that in the modern economy, cultural momentum can sometimes overcome fundamental business realities. Steam may have won the battle for digital game distribution, but GameStop's transformation into a meme stock icon represents an entirely different kind of victory. One that Gabe Newell and his team of engineers could never have anticipated when they launched their simple game update system back in 2003.